She had finally outdone herself, and not in a way anyone could have predicted, not in a way that could be explained without feeling the weight of her control pressing down like a storm cloud over every house, every lawn, every smile in the cul-de-sac. This wasn't your usual HOA drama. This wasn't the petty notes left on doors or the standard complaints about trash cans being out a minute too long. No, this was a new level, a level of tyranny that made ordinary petty disputes feel like child's play. Karen had gone nuclear. Karen, self-appointed queen of every corner of our street, waving her clipboard like it was a crown, as if the universe had entrusted her with the sacred duty of policing happiness itself. For years, she had been the ruler of the cul-de-sac, a figure who could take the joy out of simple things, who could make children's laughter feel like an offense, who measured compliance not with reason, but with fear, and who expected her neighbors to bow silently, pretending that the rules made sense, pretending that life should revolve around her whims. Her HOA was notorious, terrifying, unforgiving. You got fined for trivial things, for living too loudly, for leaving a trash can out a few minutes late, for having flowers that grew outside her arbitrary lines, and for the tiniest acts of joy that didn't have her permission. Most neighbors had surrendered, paid the fines, cut their grass to the exact height she demanded, and whispered prayers hoping she would vanish, hoping the world would find some natural way to remove her from their lives. But not me. I had something she didn't, something no rule, no fine, no intimidation could take away. I had courage. I had a backbone. I had the conviction that my son's childhood was not hers to control. And that summer, when my 8-year-old son, Kelvin, approached me with the brightest eyes and the simplest question, I knew exactly what I had to do. "Dad, can I set up a lemonade stand?" he asked, wide-eyed, hopeful, excited. His eyes sparkled with dreams too big for this little street, dreams that deserved to breathe, dreams that deserved to be nurtured, not crushed. That I smiled, my heart swelling with pride and determination, and said, "Sure, kiddo, let's make it happen." I wasn't about to let a suburban tyrant tell my son that happiness, ambition, and a little hard work were illegal. I grabbed the HOA rule book and went through it carefully, line by line, paragraph by paragraph. Nothing, absolutely nothing, prohibited lemonade stands. And so, that weekend, we set to work that we built the stand ourselves, would cut carefully, frame sturdy enough to survive a summer of wind and rain, painted bright yellow to catch the eye and bring cheer to anyone passing by. Kelvin added his personal touches, drawing happy little lemons, smiling faces, and writing the sign in his messy, proud handwriting. Kelvin's Lemonade, $1. It was perfect. It wasn't just a stand, it was hope. It wasn't just lemonade, it was the smell of summer, the sound of laughter, the promise that joy could still exist in a world ruled by petty tyranny. By the time the first batch was chilled and ready, the smell of fresh lemons and sugar filled the air, a smell so bright and sweet it could have lifted the clouds off the street, if only for a moment. Kelvin stood behind the stand, grinning from ear to ear, greeting neighbors with energy and pride, his little hands handling coins with the kind of care and fascination only a child could bring to the first taste of independence. For once, everything felt right. No HOA notes on the door, no glaring eyes from windows, no fear of fines. Just a father watching his son, a son discovering the joy of earning his first dollars, a street momentarily freed from the shadow of Karen's tyranny. But peace in a Karen-run neighborhood never lasts. It is not in her nature to allow happiness, not if she cannot control it, not if it exists outside her influence. The moment Karen realized a child was spreading joy without her permission, the moment she understood that Kelvin's lemonade stand was thriving, she took it personally. She was not someone who ignored defiance. She was someone who plotted, who planned, who waited for the perfect opportunity to assert dominance, to remind everyone that her authority was absolute, that she could make any simple pleasure into a battleground. For a few blissful hours, the stand ran without incident. Neighbors smiled, children ran up to buy lemonade, coins jingled in the jar, tips were left, and laughter spread across the cul-de-sac like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Kelvin's pride swelled with each sale, each smile he earned, and I felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that, for now, his world was untouched by Karen's shadow. Then came the first warning, subtle at first, almost unnoticeable. A car slowed at the edge of the street, a familiar SUV, dark-tinted windows, her eyes scanning, always scanning, assessing, judging. And I felt it in my gut, the cold certainty that the storm was coming, that Karen would not allow this small rebellion to stand, that the very act of a child learning, smiling, and thriving was an affront to her authority. And so the game began. Kelvin continued to sell lemonade, cheerful, oblivious to the eyes watching him with malice. He laughed with customers, chatted with neighbors, and offered smiles freely, unaware that every transaction, every interaction, was being scrutinized, measured, and cataloged by someone who considered control more important than humanity. That I watched from a distance, my heart torn between pride and anxiety. I wanted him to enjoy this moment, to feel the reward of hard work and joy, yet I knew that Karen was planning, waiting for the right moment to strike, and that moment would not be merciful. But I also knew something else, that no threat, no scrutiny, no fine could take away the courage in a child who believed in the power of simple joy and the determination of a father who would protect it at all costs. This was the beginning, the first act of a story that would escalate far beyond lemonade and coins, beyond petty rules and minor conflicts, into a test of courage, a confrontation between innocence and tyranny, a story of defiance, resilience, and the lengths a parent will go to protect a child. And as Kelvin served his neighbors, smiling proudly, the world seemed momentarily balanced, the air sweet with lemon and hope. And I knew that no matter what Karen attempted, no matter how far she pushed, the stand would continue to stand, and with it, our defiance, our hope, and the undeniable power of a child's joy. The second morning dawned bright and warm, sunlight spilling across the cul-de-sac, golden and innocent, oblivious to the tension thickening like a storm cloud just beyond the horizon. Kelvin woke early, excited, bouncing into the kitchen with that wide, uncontainable smile only a child can wear. "Dad, are we ready?" he asked, eyes sparkling with anticipation, full of hope and unshakable innocence. I nodded, heart swelling with pride and anxiety at once. Today, the lemonade stand would run again. Joy would flow freely. And for a few hours, the cul-de-sac could breathe. As we set up, neighbors started trickling out, drawn by the scent of fresh lemonade, by the laughter and smiles that now carried through the streets, fearless and pure. Kids ran around, coins jingled, and Kelvin greeted everyone with confidence, counting his earnings with growing pride. This was what summer was meant to feel like, simple and bright and full of hope, but the calm was deceptive. I saw it first, the shadow slowing down at the far end of the street, the familiar SUV creeping past, tinted windows hiding eyes that never missed a detail. Karen's glare could cut through steel. Her lips were pursed, her jaw tight, every inch of her body screaming impatience, control, malice. I knew that this morning she would act, and act she did. Not immediately, not with words first, but with presence. Her son, Brad, 15, tall, confident, a mirror of her arrogance, strutted up to the lemonade stand as if it were his territory. He reached for a cup, his smirk sharp and knowing. "Put it on my tab," he said casually, as though it were normal to take without paying, as though entitlement ran in his veins by birthright. Kelvin, polite and innocent, smiled awkwardly and handed him a cup, but the act repeated again and again until Kelvin's patience cracked. By the third free lemonade, he crossed his arms, lips pressed tightly, eyes narrowing. "No money, no lemonade," he declared, small but firm, a stand of principle as solid as the wood beneath him. But Brad's pride erupted. He puffed his chest, sneered, and called my son stingy, small, incapable of understanding generosity. I stepped forward, voice firm, commanding authority over entitlement. "If you can't pay, don't come back." He rolled his eyes, stomped off muttering threats about his mother, his shadow lingering like a warning that it didn't take long for Karen to appear. She came marching down the street like a storm incarnate, heels clicking against concrete, clipboard clutched tightly as though it were a weapon, sunglasses concealing her eyes, but not her intent, lips pressed tight, like she had swallowed every sour lemon in the world. "How dare you humiliate my son?" she barked the moment she saw us. Humiliate. My blood boiled at the absurdity. "He was stealing," I said, voice steady, controlled, pointing at the lemonade jar like it was a crime evidence. But the truth was, my son had been polite, patient, and generous to the point of exhaustion. Her fury escalated instantly. That stand is now banned. Unauthorized business operation. Violation of HOA property rules. She hissed it like venom, her entire being vibrating with rage, authority, and obsession. I laughed. It's my driveway, Karen. There is no rule against lemonade stands. Her face flushed crimson, her control slipping, but her pride screamed louder. If I see that stand tomorrow, you'll regret it, she threatened, storming off with the fury of someone who believed the world should bend to her every whim. The next morning, undeterred, Kelvin set up his lemonade stand again. Cheerful, proud, fearless. The neighborhood loved him. People stopped. Children ran to buy lemonade. Conversations flowed. Laughter filled the air. And yet, every time Karen's SUV rolled by, I felt her gaze, drilling through the air like invisible bullets. She slowed, glared, and drove off, plotting, scheming, her obsession growing. The tension in the street grew unbearable. Each sale Kelvin made, each coin collected, each smile exchanged became a rebellion, a challenge to Karen's authority, a beacon of defiance against tyranny. And with every act, her patience thinned, her malice sharpened. By mid-afternoon, I noticed her phone in her hand, out the window, recording, photographing, gathering evidence like a predator cataloging her prey. Her plotting was deliberate, meticulous, a storm preparing to break. I felt the weight of inevitability pressing down on us, but I also felt something stronger. Determination, courage, and the undeniable belief that no tyranny, no hatred, could steal a child's joy if I stood with him. The third day arrived, and business boomed. Kelvin, now confident and professional in his small endeavor, interacted with neighbors like a seasoned entrepreneur, handling coins, pouring lemonade, exchanging smiles. I watched from the kitchen, heart full of pride, yet tense with awareness that Karen would not allow this freedom. I could feel the air shift, a warning, a prelude to chaos. And then it happened. The screech of tires shattered the laughter, the air thickened with panic, the world narrowing into a moment of terror. Karen's SUV, massive, relentless, barreled halfway onto my driveway. The lemonade stand, Kelvin's summer of pride, hope, joy, was crushed beneath the bumper. My son lay on the ground, dazed, knees scraped, blood seeping slowly, painfully, into his skin. Time froze. Every heartbeat thundered. I sprinted toward him, terror fueling every step. Before I could reach him, the SUV reversed, a second deliberate strike, a message of hatred, control, obsession. Kelvin was thrown again, flattened, trembling. My blood ran cold, fury and fear clashing in my chest. I shouted, waving, pleading for her to stop. Neighbors poured out of their homes, phones raised, some crying, some shouting, some paralyzed with disbelief. That I knelt beside my son, pressing hands to his wounds, whispering words of protection and hope, begging silently for him to hold on, for the nightmare to end. Karen, however, stepped out as if she were the victim, rage dripping from every word. "You did this," she yelled. "I warned you. You defied the HOA." Something inside me broke. Years of restraint, patience, and civility shattered like glass. I grabbed a broken piece of wood from the shattered stand and struck with force, a single act of protection, of fury, of justice. Karen fell, unconscious, a violent punctuation to her obsession and cruelty. Paramedics arrived, sirens screaming, neighbors frozen, some filming, some shaking, some whispering that this time she had gone too far. My son, trembling, pale, barely conscious, was lifted gently onto a stretcher, arms and legs wrapped carefully, breathing shallow but alive. Across the street, Karen lay broken, her empire of fear crumbling instantly, blood tracing lines across her forehead, dignity stripped in moments. Police arrived, 3 cruisers slicing through the chaos. Statements were taken. Her claims of authority rang hollow against the testimony of truth. For once, the world saw the queen for what she was. Tyrant, danger, obsession made human. And as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the street, I held my son close, whispering comfort, gratitude, fear, love, and determination. The war had only just begun, but we had survived the first storm, and the stand, the small symbol of hope and joy, had already won a victory that money, power, and tyranny could not undo. The aftermath of that day left the street in a state of suspended disbelief, a strange combination of fear, anger, and cautious relief hanging heavy in the air. The sirens had faded, but their echo lingered, a constant reminder that the rules of this cul-de-sac had been rewritten violently and irrevocably. Neighbors whispered in clusters, some shaking heads, some staring silently, others recording every moment, knowing this was a story that would echo far beyond the street. And in the middle of it all, I held Kelvin close, heart pounding, sweat and tears mingling, whispering to him that he was safe, that he had survived the storm, that his lemonade stand had stood as a symbol, as small and bright as it was, against something far larger, something darker than a child could understand. Karen, meanwhile, had been subdued by paramedics, restrained, her previous air of invincibility stripped away. For the first time, she was vulnerable, human, and the world could see it. No clipboard, no sunglasses, no polished shoes to command attention. Just a woman who had let obsession, cruelty, and fear dictate her actions, facing the consequences. Her threats had failed, her authority was gone, and for a fleeting moment, the street collectively breathed, knowing that justice, though delayed, was arriving. The police, efficient and unyielding, began taking statements. Neighbors, shaken but resolute, recounted the events, the stares, the threats, the free lemonades taken, the escalating obsession, and finally, the violent attack. I told them everything. The stand, Kelvin's innocence, the repeated harassment, the SUV, the fear in my son's eyes. Each word I spoke carried the weight of truth, and each neighbor nodded, their silence a testament to the undeniable reality. Karen had gone to FAR.AS officers moved to secure her. I watched the street transform from a battlefield to a fragile sanctuary. Children who had run screaming moments before now stood still, witnessing the limits of control, the fragility of fear, the astonishing strength of courage and defiance. Kelvin, pale but resilient, clung to my side, small fingers gripping mine, learning a lesson far beyond lemonade. That life sometimes demanded bravery, that standing up for oneself, for innocence, could shift even the most entrenched power. Her court proceedings began swiftly. The neighborhood watched from afar as the queen of control faced the legal system she had always thought would bend to her whims. Witnesses were called, evidence presented. Every photograph, every video taken by neighbors, and even Karen's own obsessive documentation became a testament to her relentless tyranny. And the truth, undeniable, unshakable, laid bare. She had attacked a child. She had escalated to a level of danger and obsession that no law could ignore. Throughout the trial, the community felt a mixture of fear and vindication. We had lived under her rule for years, seen her petty punishments, her fines, her attempts to control lives with arbitrary rules. And yet, none of that compared to the moment she crossed the line into outright violence. Kelvin, small but strong, testified bravely, recounting his innocence, the joy he sought to share, and the cruelty that had threatened him. His words, simple and pure, struck with more force than any legal argument could. The jury, moved by his courage, could see the truth in the small details, in the honest, trembling recounting of a child who had only wanted to sell lemonade, to earn a little pride, to learn a lesson in effort and reward. Neighbors, once silent under fear, spoke openly, sharing stories of fines, arbitrary notes, and petty control that had haunted their lives. Each voice added weight, a chorus of truth rising against a woman who had long believed that fear equaled respect, that control equaled loyalty. And slowly, carefully, deliberately, the tide turned. Karen's empire, built on intimidation and obsession, began to crumble under the unrelenting force of reality. The verdict, when it came, was swift. Guilty on charges that reflected the severity of her actions, consequences that mirrored the harm she had inflicted, and a sentence that would ensure she could no longer threaten, intimidate, or harm. Justice, delayed by years of petty control and fear, had finally arrived. And as the gavel struck, a collective sigh swept through the neighborhood, a release of tension, a moment of vindication, a recognition that courage, truth, and the innocence of a child had prevailed over cruelty. Kelvin, still small, still trembling, clutched my hand, his eyes wide with the weight of what he had experienced. I knelt beside him, brushing tears from his cheeks, whispering words of comfort and pride. His lemonade stand, damaged but unbroken, remained as a symbol of resilience. Each coin earned, each smile shared, each moment of bravery stood as proof that even the smallest among us could challenge injustice, could create light in a world shadowed by fear. The community, once under her thumb, began to breathe again. Conversations returned to the street, laughter returned to lawns, and even small acts, lemonade stands, barbecues, children playing freely, became symbols of defiance and hope. Karen's shadow, long and oppressive, faded, leaving a reminder that power without justice is fragile, and cruelty unchecked can only last until someone dares to stand against it. And through it all, I realized something profound. The world is shaped not by the tyrants who demand obedience, but by the courage of those who refuse to surrender, the bravery of a child who simply wanted to share joy, and the determination of a parent who will fight, without hesitation, to protect innocence. Kelvin's lemonade stand had become more than a business, more than a summer project. It had become a beacon, a story of triumph, a lesson that courage and love could outshine tyranny, no matter how formidable it seemed. The weeks that followed were unlike anything our quiet cul-de-sac had ever experienced. Karen's empire of fear, built meticulously over years, had crumbled like sand slipping through a child's fingers. Her mansion, once a symbol of tyranny, stood empty, gates locked, lawns untended. Her accounts were frozen reminders of how fragile power is when wielded through intimidation rather than respect. And while the legal system did its work, the neighborhood began to heal, slowly but surely, like the sun breaking through months of storm clouds. Kelvin, small yet remarkably resilient, returned to his lemonade stand, this time with a new sense of purpose. Every cup poured, every smile exchanged, every coin collected was a quiet triumph over cruelty, a message to anyone who believed that fear could dominate innocence. He stood taller, more confident, carrying with him lessons far deeper than any summer project could teach. Courage, patience, resilience, and the understanding that standing up for what's right is never wasted, even when the world seems stacked against you. Karen, meanwhile, faced the full weight of her actions. Convicted of charges reflecting the severity of her violence and obsession, she was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. The queen of the cul-de-sac, who had once wielded power like a weapon, was reduced to the confines of a cell, stripped of the influence she had cherished, forced to confront her actions without the luxury of denial. Restitution orders, frozen assets, and permanent infamy replaced her illusions of control, a stark lesson that cruelty, unchecked, carries consequences far beyond imagination. The community, once silent under fear, now spoke openly. Stories of petty fines, arbitrary rules, and harassment were shared, not as a means of blame, but as reminders of resilience, survival, and the collective strength that emerges when ordinary people refuse to bow to tyranny. Neighbors who had once hidden behind closed doors came together, laughing, sharing meals, and supporting one another. The street, once dominated by fear and surveillance, transformed into a space of trust, joy, and human connection. Parents watched their children play freely, without the shadow of fear. Small acts, lemonade stands, bike rides, impromptu barbecues, became symbols of freedom, courage, and community spirit. Kelvin, though still a child, became a quiet hero, a reminder that even the smallest actions, rooted in innocence and bravery, can catalyze profound change. Every smile he brought to the neighborhood was a victory. Every coin earned a testament to resilience and hope. As I reflected on the events, I realized the depth of the lessons learned. Life is fragile, innocence is precious, and courage comes in many forms, sometimes quiet, sometimes explosive. The story of Karen and the lemonade stand was not merely about conflict, rules, or punishment. It was about human spirit, the resilience of community, and the undeniable power of truth and justice. Even now, when neighbors glance at the driveway where Kelvin's lemonade stand first stood, there's a subtle nod, a shared memory of what courage can achieve. It reminds us that no matter how intimidating tyranny may appear, it can never withstand the purity of courage, the determination of truth, and the simple, unyielding hope of a child who believes in fairness, joy, and love. And while Karen's shadow lingers in our stories, in whispered cautionary tales, it serves a new purpose: to remind us, always, that power must be tempered by justice, that cruelty inevitably carries consequences, and that bravery, even small, even young, has the strength to reshape the world. In the end, the lemonade stand endured not just as a summer project, but as a symbol of resistance, resilience, and hope. A single act of defiance, born of innocence, had changed a neighborhood forever. And for Kelvin, the lessons of courage, love, and perseverance will guide him for a lifetime, ensuring that the darkness of fear never eclipses the light of determination and joy. The street healed, the neighborhood laughed again, and the summer sun shone brighter than ever, carrying with it the memory that even in the face of tyranny, light, courage, and love endure, always.